This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So please grab some champagne and celebrate with us as we commemorate our 50th podcast. Hey, it's Oklahoma. As we commemorate our 50th podcast and our 1-year anniversary of the show.
Huh? Really? Wow. Congratulations to us.
Congratulations
to us.
Thank you for spending the last year with us. As we tried to figure out what the heck we were doing. And thanks for staying with us for the next hour as we talk about our birthday in our first half. In our second half, I'm going to talk about how to write an obituary. And in our third half, Charlie has an obituary to share. So, Charles, for our birthday, I chose Died and Went to Heaven chocolate cake. Because what a way to go, baby.
That's true. What a way to go. Yes. So we don't actually have to act that out, right? Die and go to heaven.
Well, someday we will.
Well, someday we will. Yes.
So check out our recipe on our webpage. So, Charlie, we've been doing this podcast, Everyone Dies, for a year.
Yes.
What have you learned in this last year?
In this last year, Marianne, I have learned that if you want the best, selection, go to your local liquor store early for the best selection.
Early in the morning?
Well, when the store first opens, yes.
And what does that have to do with us? Are you saying that you drunk the whole time?
Oh no, not the whole time. No. Well, as often, often we have, discussed cocktails and just, sitting back, sipping our favorite beverages. One needs to be prepared, which is then also probably the biggest thing is preparation, as we have said a lot and bears repeating. You must be prepared. You have to be prepared to die, and by that, advanced care plans, the paperwork. Let your wishes be known to people who will, follow through on your healthcare proxy. To make sure you have the death that you want. Tell people how you feel about them. Don't take that for granted, and just that, and just to understand also. And we also keep advocating that, death is a part of life. It's the last part of life, but a part of life nonetheless. And it's still many times people are uncomfortable discussing it, thinking about it, but it's going to happen. We are all future corpses.
So what if it's not the last part of life? What if this life is the precursor to what happens after we die? What if this is like being in our mother's womb that's preparing us for birth? What if death really is birth, Charlie? Have you ever thought about that?
Birth into something. Oh, that's interesting. No. I have on occasion, thought maybe there's a higher. Oh, so I guess it would be. I was going to say, I don't know, a higher plane, a dimension that we go to, but then that would be just what you're describing right there. That this now alive, here speaking, is a precursor to that, and that is, the true death, and this is now the place where that we are now in the womb, and this is not really that that birth yet. The birth hasn't happened yet. So, but I didn't think of it like that. But like I said, I have thought that maybe there's something after all this.
I'm just wondering if we're, after we die and we get to where we're going or whatever happens, we're going to look around and say, well, I'll be darned. I didn't see this twist in the plot coming,
That's true. And how would we know? Yes.
You just hope there's somebody there to say, do you believe this? Look at this.
Yeah, I and it is nice to be having a chat like this, but I don't know. I just see so much division, not only in America, but in other parts of the world too. That even a lot of people just don't believe there's anything afterwards. A lot of people have nothing to do with religion. It would just be nice if this could just be. Just that people could just like share their thoughts without having to worry that someone's going to take offense or start calling you names or that.
Oh, so you're concerned about that? See, I'm not concerned about that because we're just drinking our champagne, celebrating our birthday, and having a chit chat.
Yes, and
I'm not I'm not in any way saying any of this stuff. I'm not saying that any of this stuff, this part of our conversation is real or evidence based or anything. It's just like, what if? And maybe I have an overactive imagination, but I kind of like to think about, well, wonder what would happen if you do this. I went. Because my throat's been bad since my surgery, so I went and saw an ENT the other day, and he put this camera through my nose and down my throat, and it reminded me. I said to him, when I was little, I put buttons up my nose. My sister was sewed, and she'd leave her stuff around, and I was pretty young, but I remember it. I shoved a bunch of buttons up my nose, and my mother was really annoyed. And she said, "Why did you do this?" I said, "Well, I wanted to see what would happen." And she said, "Well, what did you think what would happen?" And I said, "I don't know. That's why I did it."
That's why but you had to find out exactly. Yes, I understand that.
And so I see this conversation in the same way. I had a sister who was a beautician, and she would use razors, and she left her razors laying around. So I took one. I saw her cutting hair, and I used it on my finger, and I cut my finger. And again, my mother's like, "What is wrong with you?" Of course, both my sisters got in trouble for leaving their stuff around. I said, "Well, I wasn't sure what would happen." It's like, "Well, what did you think?" It's like, I didn't know.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But then I knew.
Yep. You find out the hard way.
Well, I found out and then had to deal with my mother's ire.
Yes.
Well, anyway, so it's been a good year. I've learned about how much work doing a weekly podcast is. It's not like I have a bar and let's put on a show. Remember we said that in our first podcast?
Yeah.
It's Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney would be very disappointed that it's not that easy. But, from feedback we've gotten from our listeners and that kind of thing, I can see how important the information is that we provide, and that I really am as committed, if not more so than when we started, that what we are able to offer is important to give people good, solid information that
Yes,
they don't have
right.
to
Yeah.
wonder where's this coming from and, what rock did these people crawl out of and
Yeah.
can we even bother to listen to what they're saying? I think people know they can trust what we say and that if we don't know, we say so.
And then that too, we leave information for them and, links and stuff like that. And of course, with the podcast being there, people can then also, go back and, take notes and listen again to something we said. And it's just also good to, like I say, we often talk about, well, as you know, Marianne, about preparation, just to keep reminding people that you really need to advocate for yourself, and that comes through preparation. So it's just that we just keep giving that same message, which is good. Yeah.
Right. So thank you to all our listeners, and be sure to start sharing with your friends because, world domination is always on my list of things to do.
That's right. WD for shorthand.
Yep. With no buttons in my nose.
With no buttons in the nose, yes.
No. And for any child who's listening to this, what happens when you put buttons up your nose is your mother gets really mad at you, and then they have to dig them out. So let me save yourself that life lesson.
So to catch up on past episodes or just to find different information, please go to everyonedies.org. That's dies.org for a link for for recipes, poems, additional resources, everything. We appreciate your questions and anything else you want to tell us. You can email us at mail@everyonedies.org. And again, dies.org. Also, please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies. This time you have to spell it out. Everyone Dies. And please remember to rate and review this podcast. Marianne, what's next?
Hey, Charlie, in our second half, I thought that we could talk about obituaries because this week I had the pleasure of interviewing Glenn Rifkin, and I'll tell you more about him in a minute. So an obituary is really a story of a life. Writing obituary for someone you love is an important way to honor and celebrate their life. The obituary acknowledges your loss and informs the community of the death and invites those who knew your loved one, as well as all the people that care about you, to attend the funeral and offer sympathy and support. An obituary is where you record a loved one's life story, and that obituary will live forever. Once it's published, it'll be available forever. It's more than a simple death announcement. An obituary pays tribute to someone by saying something about who they were as a person. And this can be done in many ways, sharing a story from their life, writing about their hopes and dreams, listing their accomplishments, telling about their loves and favorites, and reflecting on what they meant to you. The most memorable obituaries often touch on those aspects of a person's life and legacy. Now, you've seen Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, haven't you, Charlie?
Yes, I have.
So in there's a storyline, and those of you who haven't seen it, you can see it on Disney. They recorded it, and I think did a pretty good job. There's a storyline about Hamilton's wife Eliza's response when she finds out about his affair with Maria Reynolds. The story Burn is a tear-jerking showstopper within the show, as Eliza reacts with despair and rage to the news that Hamilton has been unfaithful to her. And adding insult to injury or injury to insult, depending on which way you want to mix that one up. He's written a pamphlet detailing the affair to the public. He was more concerned about saying to the public, I didn't use any money that I wasn't supposed to do this, than he was about the fact that he had an affair. So Eliza, understandably, is devastated and responds by burning all the letters that Hamilton has ever sent her. In the song, she says, "I'm erasing myself from the narrative. Let future historians wonder how Eliza reacted when you broke her heart," she sings. Her reaction to Hamilton's affair is lost to history, but Miranda imagines, as he deliberates in the lyrics to Burn, another set of lyrics, "The world has no right to my heart. The world has no place in our bed. They don't get to know what I said." So after Hamilton's sudden death in a duel with Aaron Burr in 1804, Eliza went out to outlive her husband by close to 50 years. In Hamilton's closing number, Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, Eliza is framed as the driving force behind Hamilton's legacy, and this is true. She really did save his writings and fiercely defended his legacy, but she was also a force in her own right. So, and there's articles, if you kind of, noodle around like I do, about how many women in this time period really took over their husbands' papers when their men died and controlled the narrative of how their men were perceived in history.
Right.
Because really, that's what your obituary is doing. It's going to, somebody wants to look up your name and look up your obituary, they're going to read, here's what their place in history was. Here's what they did. Here's what they didn't do. So
yeah, I mean, it still happens today too. So, but yeah, go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So who tells your story is important.
Yes.
So, and also understanding how to write a good obituary. So I interviewed Glenn Rifkin, who writes obituaries for the New York Times and the Washington Post. And he said that when you write a good obituary, you're writing a story that gives a sense of who this person is, what was notable about their life, and who they were. So, our listeners might be saying, well, I don't know how to do that. So let me give you some ideas, some things to think about in terms of how to craft a memorable obituary. First thing, you can talk about their favorite things. Like, for example, Shirley Ann loved black squirrels who visited her backyard. And if you were lucky, she sent you a squirrel birthday card or a present wrapped in squirreled paper. You could tell family stories, about that time that Marianne put buttons up her nose. Maybe that's a family story. Yeah. You can quote the loved one who died. Here's an example. As he would often say, beefsteaks when I'm hungry, corn liquor when I'm dry, greenbacks when I'm broke, and sweet heaven when I die. You could share their accomplishments. They were maybe on the city council or won the button up your nose contest with the most buttons going up. I think I'm obsessed now with my buttons. Anyway, talk about the ways that they showed their love. Like, for example, she would give her opinion without flinching or apology, but she never dismissed you for your choice and always welcomed you home when it didn't work out. She may slide a little and say, I told you so, into the conversation, but it was met with a side of Pringles, a bologna and cheese sandwich, smiley face pancakes, or a bowl of chicken and noodles. Remember how you frequently saw them. For example, more than once I remember Mother was at the sewing machine making clothes or drapes or something when everybody went to bed, and she was still sewing when everybody woke up. I can remember going through pictures from when we were young because we moved into our house, the tract housing. My parents moved in like 52 or so, and my brother was really little.
Mm-hmm.
But, those post-World War II houses,
right.
They all look the same.
Yeah.
And there are, a couple, of generations of pictures of my mother standing in the exact same spot on the sidewalk, a different car, as the time went on in the driveway. But, she's got her coat on and she's always holding a cake. There's like, the only time you really see pictures of my mom was like on the way to wherever it was that we were going, and she's holding a cake. So, I mean, that's a memory. That's a way that that if you were to look at family pictures, you would say, is that all she did? You can paint a picture of days gone by. For example, at one point during the Great Depression, 9-year-old Dell was the only one in the family with a job. He sold hot roasted peanuts on a city street corner to make a dime that he could bring home, so he could bring home milk and bread to his family at the end of the day. You could tell a love story. When Grover first saw Ruth at the roller skating rink, he said that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He could not control his skates as they skated right over to her. If you can't remember or you're too sad to remember, get help. Ask siblings or aunts and uncles to tell you stories that you could use. You could be creative, and we've given you lots of resources in terms of how to write your obituary. Finally, you can write your own obituary. That way you can be remembered on your own terms.
Mm-hmm.
As you write, you have the opportunity to reflect on your life, reminisce and recall favorite memories, and say goodbye to family and friends. When you write your own obituary, you get the last word. You can toss in a final zinger. You can even get the last laugh. Your loved ones, meanwhile, get a lasting memorial that preserves your life story, details the family history, and showcase your unique personality. Have you written your own obituary, Charles?
Nope. Actually, what I've done, I've scribbled a few notes just when something pops into my mind. I have about a paragraph worth of notes, a little phrase or some short sentence, which my siblings have, but no, not formally. I have. What I've done is basically written down some random thought or maybe a little phrase, but I have not organized all of that into an obituary. My siblings have access to it, so if suddenly you hear dead air because literally I just died, they will. They could either, publish it the way, just leave it alone and publish it the way it is, try to be creative and put all of those ideas together, or just not do anything about it. So, what about you?
Well, no, they can't do that part. I mean,
no,
people
they
need to know.
They won't.
Inquiring minds need to know, Charles.
Yes.
No, I'm trying to think if I've ever had to write one like for a class assignment or something like that. But an obituary, no, I don't think I've ever written one for myself.
Yeah.
Oh, this Glenn Rifkin told me about real quickly?
What?
There is a documentary called Obit, O-B-I-T,
right.
period. Yeah. Have you seen it?
Yes. I think when it first came out, actually. Yes.
I think it came out like maybe 2017. So what it's about is this small staff of obituary writers at the New York Times and how they go about writing the obituaries. And you think to yourself, well, that sounds exciting, really, right? I'm telling you, what was it, like an hour and a half or so? We were riveted.
Yeah. Oh, it really, yes. Yes.
Yeah, one thinks so. And there's this guy who is there's only one archivist left at the New York Times.
Yeah.
And he has his sleeves rolled up like you see those old-timey newspaper people. And I can't figure out if he's being funny on purpose or if he's really serious, because there's this room of 1 billion file cabinets, and I don't really think that that's an exaggeration. And he'll say, well, if you want to find something on this, they're all in this file cabinet. Well, except some of them might be over there, and some of them might be over there. But he keeps doing it, like about different topics, or he'll open a drawer. Oh, there that is. I was looking for that last week. And I'm like, is he for real, or is he like playing? Did you remember that guy?
Yeah.
Do you think he was for real?
I don't know. I just enjoyed it so much. I don't. It's a lot of material to remember. I don't think he was entirely playing.
He didn't have a look on his face. You know how some people will like roll their own eyes or get that little smile. He didn't. I mean, he's just like, oh, look at there.
Yeah, exactly. So
you know,
I'm not. Yeah.
And then they have this drawer of locked obituaries that, sometimes they'll write obituaries ahead of time, and there's a locked drawer that he has the key to. And sometimes people will say, well, I'd like to see the obituary that you wrote. I'm writing this paper, or whatever. And he'll be like, oh, no, those are top secret. Nobody can see those. Anyway, I just thought it was wonderful.
And also, Carl Reiner, it might have also been about 3 years ago, maybe just a couple of years ago. What was his documentary? If you don't see your name in the obituaries, go ahead and eat breakfast. Really?
That's from an old. That's from an old song. That's from
really? I didn't know that.
Pete Seeger's family went around and like documented, the old songs of American history or whatever. And or maybe it was Arlo Guthrie, I don't know, whoever it was. But there's a song that, it's by Pete Seeger.
Okay. Get up and go lyrics. Okay.
I get up each morning and dust off my wits, open the paper and read the obits. If I'm not there, I know I'm not dead, so I eat a good breakfast and go back to bed. Oh, and that's the refrain is, how do I know my youth is all spent? My get up and go has got up and went. And in spite of it all, I'm able to grin and think of the places my get up has been. So, there you have it.
Very good.
Another educational moment brought to you by Everyone Dies.
Yes.
But I've always loved that because it's like, if you need to read the obits to know if you're dead or not, you gotta wonder. But when I worked in hospice, I always would, we only got the Sunday paper, but I would read the obits on Sunday to see in my own head how my patients were doing.
And were you ever surprised that, you'd walk in and maybe the night, day before you were speaking with them and now you go in and, they had died?
No, because in hospice that can happen.
Yeah.
And I was just reading the paper, the newspaper obits. So, sometimes it'd be like, oh, that went fast, or that went faster than I thought it would. But,
And everyone does. Mm-hmm.
So Charlie, our correspondent who puts the bitch in Obituary, has a story for us about Dorothy Parker.
Oh,
Charles.
So do I. Yes. Having rested in a dusty filing cabinet for 23 years, the ashes of Dorothy Parker, New Yorker magazine writer and wit, finally found a resting place. She was the writer who, when dared to use horticulture in a sentence, came up with, "You can lead a horticulture, but you can't make her think." She was a founding member of the Algonquin Roundtable, where she led a group of New York City-based writers, critics, and actors at lunch in the 1920s. On August 22nd, 2020, her ashes were laid to rest. She had died in 1967. As all the
Wow.
cool, yeah, so yeah, she'd been hanging around for a while. Let's look at why, shall we? As all the cool kids who listen to this podcast know, you have to make preparations for your death. 2 years before she died, Miss Parker signed her will in front of a friend and a hotel employee and her poodle, Troy. Now, technically, a poodle does not count as a witness, so don't do this at home. Parker was a widow with no heirs. She'd had a falling out with her family. Her estate included future royalties for her writings. Her 2 collections of poetry, Enough Rope and Sunset Gun, were bestsellers. She also wrote screenplays. You might have heard of one of them, A Star is Born, recently remade by Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. The portable Dorothy Parker is still in print. The phrase, "men seldom make passes at girls who wear glasses," is hers. People knew little about her activism. Among various protests, she wrote against racist caricatures and raised money for the defense of the Scottsboro Boys, a group of black men who were wrongly accused of raping 2 white women. Now, the FBI jumped into action and helped to blacklist her in Hollywood during the McCarthy era. Not one to be daunted, Miss Parker's will stated that her estate was to go to Martin Luther King Jr. The two had never met. She died in 1967 and had written that if anything were to happen to Dr. King, that her estate would go to the NAACP. Dr. King was murdered in 1968. Dorothy Parker was cremated, and no one claimed the ashes. No one paid the storage fees either, so the crematory sent the ashes to the office of Parker's lawyer, who put the urn in his filing cabinet and forgot about it. About 10 years later, Malachi McCourt, brother of best-selling author Frank McCourt, Angela's Ashes, told the lawyer about the time he met Dorothy Parker. The lawyer reintroduced them. Years later, he contacted Parker's friends for suggestions as to her final resting place. There were many suggestions, including putting her in a bar. Dorothy never met a martini she didn't like, or snorting her ashes like cocaine. The director of the NAACP suggested she could be buried at their headquarters in Baltimore. The New York crew was not happy, but the lawyer approved. This was 1988. By 2006, the grave site, a small garden by a parking lot behind the NAACP building, was mostly forgotten, and the NAACP was talking about moving to Washington, D.C. The founder of the Dorothy Parker Society got in touch with Parker's grandnieces, who wanted her back in New York, at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, where her parents are buried. She is there now. A plaque on the box that contains the urn that contains her ashes reads, Dorothy R. Parker, 1893 to 1967. Excuse my dust.
I think that's sad that she was in the drawer for so long.
Yeah, I don't think she was aware of it, but yeah, you're right. It was just really strange. She had a falling out with her family, and actually, there's more to the story because Lillian Hellman, her she was friends with Lillian Hellman, and basically Hellman, she knew what Parker wanted, where to be buried, where about a service, which she didn't want one. But Hellman's ego got in the way, and Dorothy Parker left nothing for Lillian Hellman. So to get back at Dorothy Parker, Lillian Hellman pretty much did everything the opposite of what Dorothy Parker wanted, and did nothing about arranging for her ashes to be buried. So that's why they went to the crematory and nobody picked them up, because Lillian Hellman did nothing about picking them up, did nothing about paying the bill. So, yeah, that's why she just bounced around from place to place.
Well, I do believe in karma. So, Lillian, wherever you are. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for listening for this past year. Thank you for sharing your time with this, our 50th episode. We look forward to speaking with you over the next 50. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, Major General Retired David Gillette, our producer, Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Tom Hartman, our administrative advisor, Molly, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and our loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And this is Marianne Matzo. We look forward to talking with you soon. Remember, every day is a gift. Happy birthday.
Bye. Happy birthday.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.